don't want what we know out there.
How a person can go from really almost nothing to becoming a millionaire by owning rental properties.
He would always buy these flip houses, and I just remember thinking, this guy is crazy. Why would he buy that house?
In the past decade, there's been a huge surge in the peer-to-peer short-term rental market.
Become an insider. So you have to know the rules before you get the game.
Every second counts. So make every second count.
Welcome to the Real Estate Jam. Whether you're just beginning or the best of the best, we're glad you're here. We will share successes, failures, and strategies for the action-taking real estate investor. And now to your hosts, JD, Annabel, and Melissa.
All right, guys. Well, this is a really, really exciting episode. And you know, JD is not easily excited, and I think he's the most excited about this guest. So consider this your Valentine's Day present, honey. We are super excited to introduce the leader of the REI Sales Academy, John Martinez. John, thank you so much for finding the time to be with us today. We're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me. Pleasure being here.
Awesome. Well, I know JD's got a big lineup of questions, and if you're ready, we're going to take off.
Yeah, let's hit it.
Awesome, John. Hey, thanks for being here. Just a little bit, the first time that any of us heard about you was at a mastermind event that we were at. And one of our now mentors, a guy that we've spent a lot of time with, Don Costa, was wearing a shirt that said, "I just got John Martinez." What is that? What is that? And, you know, we really respect Don and the business that he's put together. So we started looking into some of your stuff. I just recently purchased your text message, email messaging, nurturing campaign that we're starting to implement in our own business, and we've been following you for a while. I think you just did a live sales training in February that I wasn't able to attend, and it literally broke my heart. So as Annabel said, we're super excited to have you on here. You know, a lot of our audience is going to be newer. There's going to be some experienced people, but some people might not have heard about you, and I was wondering if you could kind of give your intro, and then we'll go into some questions from there if that works for you.
Yeah, perfect. So just a little bit about me. Been in sales my whole life, basically, since late teens, early 20s. Worked my way up the corporate ladder, building sales teams, selling for larger and larger organizations, and just really building sales organizations. About 6 or so years ago, I took the funnest part for me, sales training, and I turned it into a business. And got my first REI customer, and really REI took over my business 4 or 5 years ago. So I've been exclusively training investors and acquisition agents in this space for maybe 4 years or so, how to buy how to buy more houses at deeper discounts. So that's kind of the last 20 years in 30 seconds.
Well, that's a real good synopsis. So I guess I want to know if you believe that a salesperson is made, or it's one of those, you know, inert things or those ingrained things that comes from, you know, you as a person or your talent level, natural God-given talents versus something that can be built upon.
Yeah. So I look at sales as a process that anyone can learn. That being said, there are people that take to it a lot easier. Right? They've just naturally got the skill set, or not even the skill set. I'd call it the DNA to implement the process, right? Because if you follow a good sales process, there's certain things you need to talk about, ask, uncover. And some people don't have any problem doing those things. And some people, for whatever reasons, they've got a little bit of resistance to it. So anyone can learn it, but some are going to be better suited and pick it up a lot quicker.
Yeah, just like anything else, anyone can learn to play basketball, but only a select few are going to make it to the NBA and that kind of stuff. Well,
I agree.
One of the problems that a lot of our peers and that we're attacking right now in our business is how to set up a process where we're training our guys. We want to do, ideally, we want to do some training every single day to work on. And then we also are not opposed to sending our guys to actual, conferences or events or like your stuff. But my goal is to build an overall program that gets not only my acquisitions agents, the ones out in the field, but our lead specialists, that's our lead intake guys, on the right path where we're continually improving and then analyzing their stuff. And I was wondering if you could speak on a little bit of how to build a program that we can implement to get better as a business.
I think that's a great question, because as much as I wish I could say our sales training programs, the be all end all, it's not. It's here's the formula, but then you got to practice and you got to manage to that and all that stuff. It's a piece of the overall puzzle. So once you have a system, right, all we teach is a sales system. Once you have a sales system, you got to make sure it's being adopted and implemented, and then find where people are falling short and coach them, right? So I think that's really what you're referring to, is how do you keep that continual improvement and make sure people don't actually start sliding backwards even. So the easiest way to do that, I mean, obviously, number one is going to be repetition, right? There's got to be some regularly scheduled time you devote towards this. That kind of goes without saying, but when you do that, the way I like to handle those types of coaching conversations is by picking a sales call. I mean, if it's a lead manager, it just might be, I thought this, one call where someone probably was qualified, but for some reason they didn't move to the next step. For an acquisition manager, it could be things felt good. I felt like we could have got it. I think someone else did get the deal, but, I didn't get it myself, and having a conversation about that. And whenever you have a conversation, you should always have conversations, not just about what went right or deals that you closed. You should really focus on deals you didn't close, but could have. And the way those conversations typically go, if I was having a weekly coaching conversation with an acquisition manager, for example, I'd say, let's talk about a deal that you feel like you could have won, or maybe you didn't win, but another investor did. Let's talk about that deal. Does one come to mind? Yeah, John, one comes to mind. I thought I was close. I thought we had it. I thought we had it locked up. Everything sounded good, but at the end of the day, now I can't get a hold of them. All right. So I'd start at the very end and work my way backwards. That's usually how coaching works best. And it goes like this. All right. How did the call end? Well, the call ended with, everything looks great. I just need a night to think this over, sleep on it, and then I'll call you in the morning, but things look good. Okay. So then I'd say, well, how would you have liked that call to have ended? I would have liked to have a signed contract. Okay. So what do you think would have had to have happened in the conversation previously in order for the call to have ended that way? And we just start working systematically backwards to see where the conversation fell apart, where the system kind of broke, where they skipped over. They say, well, I don't know. Well, let's talk about all the things that might stand in the way of the deal. They said they had to think it over. What did you say to make sure there wasn't a hidden deal killer? What did you say to make sure that it wasn't already a no and they're just letting you down easily? How did you dive into that? Well, I didn't dive into that. Okay. Well, next time, what could we say? How could we dive into that tactfully? What could we say? What could we ask? And that's how we just start working our way backwards to find out missteps and coaching towards those. So that's the way I handle ongoing coaching with reps.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I think that is definitely the direction that we're trying to lead. I wonder if you have any thoughts on at what point or how do you know whether or not your sales guy is a good fit and is coachable and trainable versus when it's a lost cause, or is it ever a lost cause?
Yeah, so you want to find that out as quickly as possible on the front end, hopefully, right? So I'll kind of give you the front end questions to ask, and then they're in place. How long do I wait to figure out are they performing or not, or is this them, or are they going to ever turn this around? So front end, couple questions you can ask. One thing you want to ask or figure out is if they take responsibility for their shortcomings or if they blame others. So I would ask, tell me about, your previous sales role was in, let's say, copier sales. Tell me about the biggest deal you lost. This deal. Why did you lose it? And what I'm listening for as a hiring manager or a business owner is I'm looking for whether they take responsibility or whether they blame others, because they cannot improve if they lost deals because of the market or because someone undercut them or because of external forces, because whenever they lose, they're just going to blame external forces. I don't need to change. It wasn't my fault. I'm perfect. This guy did this. This happened. The company let me down. We should have provided more discounts. So I'm looking to see, do they say, well, you know what? I think I went in a little too fast. I hit them with price a little too quick. I think I rushed through it because they were a referral. And if I took my time, I probably could have won that deal. That tells me, okay, they take responsibility, they can learn, and they can grow. And then, of course, if they say something like, you know, I didn't have a lot of company support. I really thought that they needed free this and that. I didn't get it. And then my competition came in and undercut me. I know they can't deliver that. If I'm hearing stuff like that, I'm going, all right, this person, they are what they are, and they're not going to improve because it's never their fault. So that's probably the first thing I'd look at on the front end is responsibility. That's probably the biggest question I'd ask, really, in terms of, can they get better from where they are? So let's leave it at that just to keep things simple and move on to, how long do I keep them? Usually, and I've been asked this a lot. Usually when I'm asked this, it's 2 or 3 months into it, and an investor asks that same question. They go, listen, I feel good about this person. They've got a good track record. It's been 2 or 3 months. How long's too long? And usually my answer is, if you're asking yourself that question, you already know the answer. But here's what happens. You just have to realize why that happens. Anybody who puts a ton of time and effort and resources and trust into another individual, you want them to succeed. And when you get 2 or 3 months into it, you know if it's not working out. But what goes through the investor's mind is, shoot, if I get rid of them, I'm starting over. Like all that work, all that money, all those leads I put into this person, poof, gone. All the work I put into it, to him or her, gone. I'm having to start over. I might have to get back out into the field. What if I make a bad hire again? And it's it's those thoughts that keep us holding on. So usually when I explain it that way, and I say, if you're asking that question, you probably already know, 99% of the time you go, it's not the right person. I already know. I just don't want to start over again, right? So if you're asking yourself that question, you probably know the answer. Of course, you want to give them a few weeks at least, maybe a month. If you're going to train them in the field, make sure you train them right. Make sure you give them some type of process, and then make sure they can see how it's done. They can shadow somebody, and then they can be shadowed. So whoever knows how to do what they're doing can watch them in action and then give them some good tips.
Yeah, that's great. So we are starting to flirt with your process, and one of the important things that I hear you talk about are your problem, impact, and picture perfect type questions. One of the problems that I have personally is realizing that there is a next level to go deeper into that, like realizing that it's time to ask that question and recognizing that, well, hey, I'm looking to get out of this property because it's an extra expense and I don't have time. And instead, I just take that at that surface value, and I'm having trouble tricking my brain into, and we're seeing this with our sales team too, tricking my brain to recognizing that as a trigger and then going into those questions based off of that. Do you have any advice on how to get the problem?
Right. So you've got to think of your prospects, home sellers, like you would a family member or a friend. Think about it this way. If you had a good friend or maybe a sibling come up to you and say, listen, I got to talk to you about something. I'm getting ready to sell my house because I'm going through a divorce. You wouldn't just say, okay, divorce, check mark. What would you do to a friend? Or you wouldn't just say, okay, Sue, great. You'd say, geez, what's going on? Did you even know this was coming up? What? Oh my God. You dive into it deeper. If you just skimmed over it, people would think you were a maniac, right? So you've just got to not so much think about it as sales or this is what I've got to do, but just normal conversation. Because if someone came and said, listen, I'm sorry I was late. I've been horribly sick and dealing with some stuff. We wouldn't just say, okay, cool, let's move on. You'd say, sorry to hear about that. Is there anything you want to talk about? What's going on? I'm sorry you've had to struggle with that. Has this been a long-term thing, a short-term thing? Geez, that's gotta be tough. I feel, it just happens naturally. So I think just forcing yourself to think of your prospect as a friend or family member instead of just now the motivation box is checked will help people realize, oh, this is normal conversation. This isn't weird at all. This is how I talk to anyone else if I wasn't sitting in, this person's home.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things we've also looked into is designating like role play sessions. Do you have any thoughts on that? You believe in role playing with the team, and is that a way to train for those specific scenarios?
It is. It's never as good as the real thing, right? It just isn't. But what role play is really good for is it forces us oftentimes for the first time to start to formulate those words and make them come out of our mouths. And when we role play, it's so uncomfortable role playing because oftentimes we're saying this stuff we know we should be saying for the very first time. And when we say it for the very first time or the second or third time, things are jumbled up, it's uncomfortable, it doesn't come out right, it sounds robotic, and that's why we hate to role play. But that's the reason why we need to role play, because number one, you're never going to do that stuff on an appointment when a sale is on the line for the first time, because I haven't practiced that, I don't know what I'm going to say. Now is not the time when I've got a deal on the line. And if you do, it's going to come out so garbled that first time, you'll probably never do it again. So role play is just good. You get those at-bats in, right? You get that practice and you get the junk out of the way and you start to find a flow. You start to ask the same questions over and over a certain way and you get really comfortable with it. So when it's game time, you can ease into it a little bit easier. That's all role play is for. I think if role play sounds absolutely horrible, I'm thinking thumbs up, good, better here than on a sales call. I'd encourage my salespeople, this is going to say, just give them permission. This is going to sound horrible. It's supposed to. It's the first time we're doing it. And it's not a real life situation. So that's uncomfortable too. But let's do this so much that once you start hearing yourself saying the same words over and over again, repeating stuff over and over again, that's when you know, hey, I'm getting a groove. I kind of have my spiel down. And that's the point of role play. I think it's absolutely, it's a great thing. And just know what it's used for.
John, on that note on role play, do you recommend that the sales team practice with one another or perhaps practice with an outsider?
You can do both. I highly recommend, and this is going to sound a little weird, but I did my best role play when I was learning different sales processes, not with my peers, but waiters and waitresses is where I did all my practice. Because, for example, what was mentioned a moment ago was going deeper on the problem, impact, and picture perfect questions. You sit down for lunch, you're going to notice there's all kinds of opportunity for that type of conversation, and it's real life conversation. And I'd like to sit down and go, I'm going to ask an impact question. I'm going to see if this gets really weird or not, or if I could just have a normal conversation with a normal person. And, the waiter or waitress would walk up and be like, oh, end of the shift or beginning of your shift. And he goes, end of the shift. I go, that's got to feel good, huh? You go, yeah, I got a lot of stuff going on. What kind of stuff you got? And you just have a normal conversation. And that's how I like to practice, because it wasn't scripted, it wasn't rehearsed. And when I got to a point where I said, I can ask a problem, impact, or picture perfect question with just a normal person, or just go, really, when you say blank, what do you mean? And we just have a normal conversation. That was my best practice. And what you'll realize is with your coworkers, with family members, with friends, there's hundreds of moments every day where this stuff just makes complete sense. And if you just practice here and there in those situations, you get very good at doing that stuff conversationally. So I prefer to practice with strangers instead of peers, because you'll be presented with more opportunities to practice than anywhere else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Thank you.
It does, and I almost feel like it's a Jedi mind trick. I do practice using it to just from my full-time job. There's a huge interpersonal communication piece where I have subordinates that I have to connect with on a personal level to help influence them on every day, and that's where I've been able to practice a lot of your things the most. And it is literally like a Jedi mind trick. Like, tell me your problems.
And I think honestly, people want to talk, we want to be good people and we want to know other people care, I think. So it's just, it's so natural in a lot of ways.
Yeah. People want to be heard and understood. I mean, that's universal. it's weird that sometimes we have to use a formula to do that, but if you use a formula enough, it just becomes natural. Think of it like a psychologist, right? Psychologists are very, very regimented and formatted with the conversations they have. But if you've ever talked to one, I have, I don't know if you have, but I have before, right? I've got typical problems like everyone else and stuff I've had to work through. But it's very natural, right? And they're leading the conversation somewhere. They're getting you to self-discover stuff, and it gets deep, right? But it doesn't sound, if you go talk to one, it doesn't sound like, oh, this is a robot. You actually develop a connection. It's the same thing in sales, right? It's just, it feels weird at first because you're kind of following a formula, but when you get used to it, it starts to happen really naturally. In fact, it gets to the point where you don't even know you're doing it anymore. It becomes a natural part of your conversational life every day.
John, when we're looking at some of the role-playing scenarios, one of those that I think we want to go over is the deal killers. I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the common deal killers that you're seeing, and where a good starting point to practice with our team. As far as that line of questioning goes.
Right. So I off the top of my head, I'd say the biggest things that get in the way from a deal closing are going to be the risk and discomfort part, right? And so that encompasses everything from, am I making a good decision? What am I going to do? How am I going to move? What's this whole process look like? Is this the right company? Is this the right person? Is this the right way? That's a huge one. I would say other options is a huge one too. Again, is this the right company? Should I list it? Should I keep it? Is now the right time? Should I rehab it myself? And I would say the final one that most people don't think of are relationships. And when I say relationships, I'm talking about anyone that's going to be impacted by this decision, big or small. So it could be tenants, people living in the house, people who want to have or live in the house. It could be people who are just going to have some input about the decision you make, right? Hey, that's a good decision, Bob. I don't think you should do that, something like that, an influencer of some kind. So those are probably the top three. So if I was just starting with the team, I'd say, let's just get one very basic surface level question to try to hit those three things. So as far as competition goes, I'd probably just make sure, okay, ask this question on every sales call, to uncover your competition, kind of find out and start walking through that conversation. Hey, listen, obviously I'm not your only option here. At this point in the conversation, I don't think either of us are even sure if we're the best option yet. Let me ask you this. Have you thought about just keeping the property? See where that conversation goes. See if they disqualify it. See if you find more pain you didn't find before. Have you thought about listing it? And what you're gonna do is, what you want to do is find out, number one, is there competition? And if there is competition, what is it? Who is it? But more importantly than that, if they get to this point with you, most of the time, what will happen is they will systematically start disqualifying that competition. You want those doors shut, because if those doors are still open at the end of the sales call, it's going to end in a maybe you're thinking over, right? Because, hey, listen, I haven't had a chance to think about all my options. Whether they say those words to you or not, that's going through their head. I'm going to have to get back to you. So we want to systematically shut those doors so they get to a place where they can make a decision, or figure out what are we against so we can sell against it. So that's other options. As far as relationships, influencers, that type of stuff goes, the way I like to ask a question like that, and again, you want to put it, role play so you can put it in your own words. The way I ask it is a couple of different ways. One, hey, listen, is there anyone who's going to have an opinion about what you decide to do, whether you ask for it or not? That's one great way to ask it. Yeah, my dad, he's going to wring my neck. Okay, what's that conversation going to sound like? What kind of questions is he going to ask? What's his biggest concern going to be? Because there I'm going to figure out, do we need to pull this person into the conversation? If we can't pull them in, do I have to make sure I cover in my presentation so when this conversation happens, I equip my prospect with everything they need to give the answers, right? So that's a great way to ask about relationships. Probably the easiest and best, so I'll leave that one there. As far as risk and discomfort, what I like to do is pretend like the deal was done and then start going through, all right, now what are you worried about, right? We agreed on money, we agreed on the deal. What are you going to have to figure out? Because you don't want this popping up at the end going, love what you're saying, but there's stuff I got to figure out. And that turns into a maybe you're thinking over. And what you really don't want to happen is you do a deal and then you get an email 48 hours later, a cryptic cryptic text or an email like deals off, can't do it, right? You want to uncover that stuff now. So to uncover that, I basically ask this. I go, listen, let's say, we get to the end of this thing. We put together an offer and a good structure for you, and we both agree on it. Everything works for both of us. We're thrilled about what we put together. We both agree. You wake up tomorrow morning and you think, oh my gosh, this is real. I've got to move. Walk me through everything you're going to need to figure out at that point. What is your biggest worry? And I'm going to try to figure out, is this something that can kill the deal? If it is, I'm going to deal with it right now instead of at the end of the call or afterwards. So those are the three biggest.
Awesome. I think those are super helpful, and just to think about the way you're thinking about it, I think is the most beneficial piece, to setting up our sales team. One of the other problems, John, that I personally come across is sometimes if the answer that I'm receiving from the homeowner is one that I'm comfortable with, that I believe is the way that I would handle a situation if I was there. So, for example, and I think this one falls into the same let me think it over or I got to ask my wife. But for some reason, this specific response is let me bring this contract to my real estate attorney and have them go over it. To me, that's a valid thing. No contract that I'm ever going to sign am I going to push that way. But I think because I feel that way, instead of digging deeper into that, I feel like, well, that's a valid excuse. Of course you're going to want to have this signed over, but I think that's also a maybe. That's not a yes or no, that's a maybe. And we know that maybes kill.
Yeah. It could be a number of things. It could be legit the attorney, hey, I'm going to have my attorney review it. Or it could just be, hey, this is my excuse to get out of this conversation, right? Could be there's a hidden deal killer. It could be that it is a no, and this is a polite way of letting you down. So what you mentioned is a very real thing. So the way we sell anything is the exact way we buy. So if you think things over and price shop, when you have a prospect, a home seller who says, I'm going to think things over and price shop, it's really hard to go against the grain because your brain is screaming out, yes, that's exactly what I would do. Done, do it. I've got nothing to say. It's hard to fight against that. So that's a very real deal, and it's really good that you recognize it because most people don't. It's called non-supportive buy cycle, is a fancy name for it. But what you need to do is, knowing that that's what you do, knowing that that's kind of a weakness of yours, you need to script out. You don't want to live in the moment. You need to script out a question to ask that, every time I hear this, how do I check? And if I was going to script out a question, I'm just going to pick this thing apart. I'm going to go, okay, if I'm getting that, it could be one of three things. It could be, I need my attorney to look at it. Fair enough. This is just the way I make decisions. It could be, it's a no, but I'm going to let you down easy and just give you kind of this wishy-washy excuse. Or it could be something in between. It could be, I really like it, but there's some unanswered questions. There's some stuff I need to figure out. So I'm buying myself some time, and I'll get back to you when I'm comfortable getting back to you. So knowing that it could be three things, my first train of thought is, well, let's figure out which one it is, right? Let's figure out which one it is. And then once we know which one of the three it is, then let's deal with that. So, I'm going to use what we call tactical empathy and also psychological reactance to get that answer. You don't want to call someone out and say, I think you're lying to me, because you're not going to get a good response, right? So, we probably don't have time to get into tactical and psychological reactance and why it works and what it is, but it would probably sound like this. This is how I would handle it every single time. Listen, Frank, I appreciate that. And that's exactly what I would do. Listen, is it okay if I ask you something? Listen, you're obviously a very nice, polite guy and very hospitable, and I appreciate this. I've been doing this a long time, though. And typically when someone says, I need to do this or I need to do that, not always, and I could be wrong here, but sometimes it's just a very, very nice person, being very polite and telling me thanks, but no thanks. I could be wrong, but is that what's happening here? And if it is the case, it is perfectly fine, will not hurt my feelings whatsoever. I'm going to give them permission to tell me the truth. And if they are lying, I'm going to basically tell them, hey, you're a good person. You're a hero for lying to me, but I want to figure out the truth. So I need to relieve pressure. Yes is good, no is okay. I don't care. And I need to make them a hero and give them permission to tell me the truth, right? So then we're going to get to the truth. It's either going to be, no, that's what I got to do, you know, and I'm going to figure that out. So that's how I'm going to test it. Or it's going to be, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I just don't think this is the right fit for me at this point in time. And now I can dig into it. Now I know what I'm going after. So it's going to be, you know what? Thank you for telling that to me. That's what my gut said. I'm going to pull back and I'm going to say something to the effect. I'm going to probably go all the way for the no and go, that's what my gut was telling me. I didn't feel like we really had a perfect fit here. Then I'm going to start selling again. And I'm going to say something like, hey, listen, now that it's over, let me ask you this. What in the world do you think you're going to do? Right? And now all pressure's relieved. We agree this is not a deal. And I'm diving back in to see if I missed anything. So anyways, I'd script out something like that, just starting very, very simplistic. And I'd start, you know, working it into those conversations. I'd practice it so I knew, hey, I'm going to have to fall back on muscle memory because my gut's going to be telling me to just go thumbs up, cool, go do what you got to do. So you got to practice it a little bit and start with a simple question. You'll start going deeper and deeper with it.
That's amazing. That's exactly what I was looking for. And obviously you learned all of this sales stuff overnight and you know,
absolutely
you came up with this yesterday. One of the things, and this is, you know, maybe a little bit off topic, but you are in the business of selling, training, and I think you do your own real estate stuff and sales training, but you pick your avatar, you know, who you're trying to sell to. And I'm not sure if you had me in mind when you do that, but literally everything, every single piece of content on Facebook, every single ad, every single email, like I'm surprised I haven't signed my house over to you yet. Everything speaks directly to me. Now, so that might be, you know, I'm not trying to flatter you. That is for real. But that feeling that I have when it comes to engaging in your content online and engaging in your marketing, that's exactly the feeling that I want our target, our sellers, and our cash buyers and everything too, because that's another side of it. But that's exactly the direction or the way that I want them to feel about our company. And I'm trying to figure out how you do that, right? Like how do you or how do you pitch to it, or is it just like happenstance?
Yeah, it's the way it works is this. You've got to know who you are, know what your core values are, know and just speak the truth, right? Don't try to tell people what they want to hear. What you want to do is attract the right people. So it's easy for me because I know who I am, I know what I believe in, and I'm not trying to sell anyone. I just try to help. So if you come at it from that standpoint, and then let's be practical. Let's say I was in your shoes. What I would do is I'd say, all right, listen, I'm going to create 20 videos to help people who we buy houses from, regardless if I ever buy their house. Okay, what are the things they're struggling with? Okay, repairs, legal stuff, divorce. So I'm going to probably make 15 or 20 videos on, hey, you know, I don't know what you're going to do with your house. You may sell it, you may keep it, you may do, but let me just talk to you. If you're in this situation, let me just tell you real quick and easy, here's your options, right? And I'm going to do helpful videos. And I would post all 15 or 20 of those helpful videos on my website, because once your initial marketing kicks in, once you grab a lead through PPC, or you're retargeting someone because they clicked on a web page or whatever it is, what will usually happen is those people want to get help. They'll start watching those, they'll binge watch, just like everybody does. I do to Gary Vee. I've done for like everybody, right? It's human nature. You like something, you watch more of it. And then that bond grows from there, right? They go, listen, your consistency, what you talk about, I like all of it. I don't know if we'll ever do business together, but if we do, you're the guy I'm going to. That's what you want. So I create content that just don't try to over-engineer it. Just, again, as if it was a family member asking you for advice. Just be blunt and honest. Even if the advice is, hey, if you're in this situation, you probably don't want to sell your house to me or anyone like me because that's not going to be best for you because of A, B, and C, right? I think what you need to do is explore these options first because that's your easiest, best way out. Now, sometimes that doesn't always work. Happy to chat with you, but that's where I'm going first, right?
Yeah.
Good, honest, helpful advice. When people see that and you can actually help them, and it can even get into home repair stuff. And hey, if you got a leaky faucet, blah, 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 you just had a flood. Here's the top 3 companies in the area. Just help people. And when it comes time, if they ever get to the point of, I do think I want to explore selling my house, they will go to nobody else. So that's how I would handle it. It's about being authentic. It's about putting helping before selling, and the selling will happen naturally.
That's good.
Yeah, that's super good and super applicable to our market and the things that are going on there right now. I think I hope, good thing we're recording this because we're going to go back and dissect it and bring it in. John, do you think that there's any questions that we haven't asked yet, or is there, what am I missing in regards to if you were just starting out or maybe just starting to scale your business, what questions should I be asking you right now that I'm probably not?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing I would bring up for anyone new, whether you're scaling and you got some new acquisitions people, or you're the investor and you're going out there and you're buying and you got into real estate, you're like, my gosh, I didn't know that the selling and communication thing was such a big piece of it. The biggest point I want to make is that selling doesn't have to be a dirty word. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable for you. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable for your prospect. It doesn't have to be it could actually be a good, fun experience. So, a lot of people get into selling. They're like, I feel like I'm misleading or I'm pressuring and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be looked at that person. I don't want to make someone uncomfortable by turning the screws and saying, do it, do it, do it. So the biggest thing I would say is it doesn't have to be that way. And beyond that, the best salespeople in the world, it is not that way. It's not uncomfortable for the prospect. It's not uncomfortable for the salesperson. And it's a great, open, honest conversation about can we help you or not. And if we can't, I'll let you know. I'm not going to say, well, do it anyways because I want this deal. That's what sales is really about. So there's probably a lot of people listening who have realized that sales is a big piece of this puzzle and are just really uncomfortable with it. And I just want to say, take a step back, relax, do some research, find a good sales process. Just know at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable for anyone. So take, comfort in that, and then do whatever you want to with it. Go find some help, go talk to other investors, join a mass, do whatever you want to, but just know that it doesn't have to be a bad thing. That way, you can solve it if you do feel that way and you're uncomfortable with it.
That's awesome. That's really good. And I'm not sure how we're doing on time, Annabelle. But
no, I think that's perfect. I didn't really have any additional questions. I don't know, Melissa, if you had anything to add?
No, y'all covered it very well.
I guess one last question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead, man.
I know that you and your wife work closely in your business, and I'm wondering if you have any tips. One of the questions that we get, because me and Annabelle we work together in the same business, even though we're almost polar opposites in the way we think and everything like that, it's complement each other. But the question is, one, so you work with your wife, you live with your wife. How are you guys keeping your relationship healthy? And then I guess, do you have any pointers for, working with your spouse or getting your spouse on board is really more of a question that we get asked a lot.
Right. So I guess the two big points I would make. One of the biggest things that work from us, it's my fault. It took me quite a bit of learning to learn this, is to just stay in our lanes. And, we don't give each other advice unless the other one asks for it. We do our things and we have 100% trust in the other person, even if it's their first time doing it or if they're new at something. That's been a game changer because I realized that I'd been doing it for a while when my wife joined the business, and I started handing off pieces to her. And I was always looking over her shoulder and giving advice when it probably wasn't needed and not letting her learn on her own. And that created friction. And once I learned to just step back and let it happen and trust my wife, she turned out to be better at most of the things, if not everything, that she took off my plate. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. And since we learned to just kind of stay out of each other's way, like this is what you do and this is what I do, and not share any responsibilities, it's financial and business growth has been amazing, but also the relationship there's improved as well. The other big thing, which is harder to do than that, is to turn work off. Because even if you go out to lunch, you find yourself, you're talking about this deal or this thing that happened, or you're brainstorming, like you got to turn it off. You got to find it's easier said than done, but there has to be times when you just shut it down and you go, okay, we can connect as just normal people. Because here's what happens to everyone I've ever talked to in this situation. You wake up one day and you go, you know what? Every single one of our conversations are about work, right? It's natural, it happens. So at some points in time where there's vacation or dinners or whatever, you gotta learn to turn it off and just connect as human beings. It's hard, but it has to happen.
That's good.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Let's take some of it, JD, and have a date.
That's much work to do.
Yeah, I've had that exact same conversation, believe me.
Well, John, we really, really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for sharing a little bit about a lot.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that we'll have a link. Is there in the description for the podcast, but is there any place where people should go to find more about you or more
just our website? Yeah, at our website, they can find all the videos and just anything they need. So that's just a nice, easy place to point people.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Jam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, check out our website, shorefrontrestorations.com, or find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Shorefront Restorations. If you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email at info@shorefrontrestorations.com. See you next episode.